The Emperor spoke to me for the first time in 10,000 years, and his first words shattered everything I believed about the Imperium. My name is Captain Aurelius Thane of the Adeptus Custodes, the Golden Guardians who stand eternal watch over the throne room. I have served for 6 centuries without hearing a single word from the being I was created to protect. Until 3 hours ago, when everything I believed about humanity, about the Imperium, about my purpose, changed forever. The psychic summons hit me while I stood at the northwestern position of the inner sanctum. I remember the exact moment because custodians remember everything. We are designed that way. Perfect recall of every second of our service, every detail, every face of every supplicant who has entered the throne room during our watch. But what happened next? I wish I could forget. The summons was not words, it was not sound. It was pure command that bypassed my ears entirely and materialized directly inside my skull with a force that dropped me to one knee. My guardian spear clattered against the obsidian floor, the first time I had ever lost grip on my weapon in 600 years of service. Around me, my brother custodians remained standing, their golden armor gleaming in the candlelight, their eyes fixed forward as they had been for centuries. They had not felt it. Only me. The pressure in my head built like water behind a dam about to break. I tasted copper. Blood was running from my nose, hot against my lips. My enhanced physiology fought to repair burst blood vessels in my brain as fast as they were rupturing. Through watering eyes, I looked up at the golden throne, at the withered corpse that had sat motionless for 10 millennia. The Emperor had not moved. His skeletal form remained exactly as it had been for as long as I had served. The thousands of tubes and wires still connected his ancient flesh to the vast mechanisms that sustained him. The tech priests still moved through their endless routines around the base of the throne, their red robes swishing against the stone floor. Nothing had changed, except everything had changed. Come, Aurelius Thane. The voice was not gentle. It was a knife blade pressed against my thoughts. Come and witness what you were never meant to know. I tried to resist. Every fiber of my being, every aspect of my training, every modification made to my body and mind screamed at me to remain at my post. Custodians do not abandon their positions. We do not leave the throne room without direct orders from our Captain General. We stand vigilant until death or relief, whichever comes first. But this was different. This was a summons from the Emperor himself, the first such direct command given to a living soul in the throne room in living memory. My body moved without my conscious decision. I rose from my knee, retrieved my guardian spear, and began walking toward the throne. Each step felt like moving through water. My armor, which normally felt like a second skin, now seemed to weigh as much as a tank. Around me, my brothers remained motionless. They did not turn their heads to watch me pass. They did not question my actions. They simply continued their eternal vigil as if nothing unusual was happening. Perhaps to them nothing was. The tech priests noticed. I saw their hooded heads turn toward me as I approached the base of the throne. One of them, an ancient figure more machine than man, raised a mechadendrite as if to bar my path. But then he froze, his augmented eyes glowing bright red for a moment before dimming. He stepped aside without a word, as did the others. They formed a corridor for me to pass through, their silence somehow more unsettling than any challenge would have been. I climbed the steps of the throne platform. There are exactly 1,000 steps from the floor of the sanctum to the seat of the golden throne. I know this because I have counted them during the endless hours of my vigil. I have memorized every scratch in the stone, every weld mark in the metal railings, every fluctuation in the power readings displayed on the monitoring stations that line the ascent. But I had never climbed them. No one climbs them except the tech priests during their maintenance cycles and the silent sisterhood during their inspection rotations. Custodians guard the throne. We do not approach it. Yet here I was, climbing toward the being I had been created to serve, summoned by a voice only I could hear. The pressure in my skull increased with each step. By the 500th step, I was leaving bloody footprints on the ancient stone. My enhanced healing could no longer keep pace with the damage being inflicted on my body simply by proximity to whatever was happening. By the 700th step, I heard screaming. Not external screaming, but the sound of my own mind trying to process information too vast for even a custodian's enhanced consciousness to contain. I saw flashes of images that were not memories. Battles I had never fought. Worlds I had never visited. Deaths I had never witnessed. And faces, thousands upon thousands of faces, all of them wearing expressions of terror or sorrow or rage. By the 900th step, I understood with absolute certainty that I was about to learn something that would destroy me. Not physically, though the psychic pressure suggested that was also a distinct possibility, but mentally, spiritually. Whatever came next would unmake everything I believed I was. I reached the top step. Before me sat the Emperor of Mankind, Master of the Imperium, Lord of Terra, the being whose vision had united humanity across the stars 10,000 years ago. He looked exactly as he always had during my 6 centuries of service, ancient beyond measure. Withered to the point that his golden armor seemed to be the only thing holding his skeleton together. His eyes were closed, had been closed since before I was born. The tech priests said he was aware of everything happening in the Imperium through the Astronomicon, that great psychic lighthouse he maintained even in his broken state. They said his consciousness spanned the galaxy, watching over humanity even as his body decayed. I had always believed this. I had staked my entire existence on this belief. Then he opened his eyes. Not slowly, not gradually. One moment they were closed, sealed beneath papery eyelids that looked like they might crumble to dust at any moment. The next they were open, and I was staring into twin pools of golden light that contained depths I could not measure. I expected to see divinity. I expected to see the wisdom of ages. I expected to see the compassion and purpose that had driven the Great Crusade. Instead, I saw exhaustion, bone-deep weariness that transcended anything I had ever witnessed. And behind that exhaustion, I saw calculation. Cold, precise. The eyes of someone solving a mathematical equation rather than looking at a living being. You have strong mental defenses, Aurelius Thane. His lips did not move. His physical voice, if he still possessed one, remained silent. But his words filled my consciousness like water poured into a cup. That is good. You will need them for what I am about to show you. Before I could respond, before I could even form a coherent thought in response, his mind touched mine. The best way to describe it would be to imagine every memory you have ever formed, every thought you have ever had, every dream you have ever experienced, suddenly played backwards at infinite speed while simultaneously new information is being written directly into your consciousness. I saw things. I saw the Emperor, but not as he was now. Not as he had been during the Great Crusade or the Unification Wars. I saw him thousands of years before that, walking through ancient cities whose names I did not recognize, wearing faces that were not his current face, speaking languages that had been dead for millennia before the Imperium was born. I saw him in ancient Anatolia, a baby being born to a woman in a stone dwelling. But something was wrong with the vision. I saw the infant and simultaneously saw an ancient being whose consciousness stretched back through millennia of human history. A perpetual, born and reborn, living century after century, accumulating knowledge and power that no mortal mind should contain. The images came faster. I saw him during the age of strife, not hiding or preparing as the histories claimed, but actively intervening in human affairs across Terra. I saw him assassinate leaders. I saw him start wars. I saw him destroy entire cities with psychic fire. And always, always, he was watching something beyond what I could perceive, his precognitive abilities showing him branching paths of possibility, showing him futures that had not yet occurred but might, depending on the choices made in each moment. Then I saw the Primarchs, not as the histories recorded them, not as the propaganda described them. I saw them in their gestation pods beneath the mountains of Terra. 20 perfect beings grown from the Emperor's own genetic material and infused with fragments of his own essence. But I also saw something else. I saw how each Primarch was designed not just as a general or a son, but as a living anchor point, a being whose very existence would stabilize reality in specific ways, whose psychic signature would create zones of order in a galaxy threatening to collapse into chaos. The scattering materialized before me, that moment when the infant Primarchs were stolen by the Chaos Gods and flung across the galaxy. I watched as the ruinous powers tore open the warp, reaching through reality itself to snatch the Emperor's greatest works. I saw the Emperor's rage and anguish as his sons were ripped away from him. But I also saw something else, something that made my blood run cold. I saw his precognitive awareness activating even as the disaster unfolded. I saw him perceive the trajectories of each stolen Primarch, see where they would land, understand what they would become, and I saw him make a choice. He did not stop the scattering. He could not. The Chaos Gods were too powerful in that moment, their surprise attack too well coordinated. But as each Primarch tumbled through the warp toward distant worlds, I saw the Emperor's psychic presence subtly guiding their paths, not controlling them, not choosing their destinations, but ensuring that the random scatter of chaos would place each son on a world that would forge them into the tool he would need. Ferrus Manus to Medusa, Sanguinius to Baal, Angron to Nuceria. What chaos meant as sabotage, the Emperor transformed into positioning. The Horus heresy flashed before me next, but not as I expected. I saw the Emperor during the years of the Great Crusade meeting with Horus in private moments. I saw him trying to explain things to his favored son, trying to prepare him for threats that Horus could barely comprehend. I saw the frustration on both sides as father and son failed to truly understand each other. And then I saw Davin. I saw Horus wounded by the anatheme blade, corrupted by the powers of the warp as he lay dying in the Serpent Lodge. The Emperor was not there. He was on Terra working on the Webway project. But I also saw something that chilled me. I saw the Emperor's precognitive awareness. I saw him perceive this moment before it happened, understand what it would lead to, and recognize that every attempt to prevent it led to worse outcomes. In visions, he had tried warning Horus more directly. In those futures, Horus rejected the warning and fell to chaos even faster, driven by resentment at his father's lack of trust. In other visions, the Emperor stayed with the crusade, preventing Horus's fall but leaving the Webway project vulnerable. In those futures, demons poured through the Imperial Palace within a decade, and Terra fell before the crusade was complete. I watched as the Emperor made his choice, not to orchestrate the heresy, not to want it or plan it or desire it, but to allow it to unfold because every path where he prevented it led to faster, more complete extinction for humanity. I felt his anguish as he chose the lesser horror, as he accepted that half his sons would fall to chaos, that millions would die in civil war, that he himself would be broken and entombed for 10,000 years. All because the alternatives were worse. The vision shifted to the final battle aboard the Vengeful Spirit. I saw the Emperor facing Horus, his most beloved son, now transformed into a champion of chaos. I saw the battle that shattered both of them. I saw the Emperor's reluctance to strike with full force, his hope that somehow Horus could still be saved. And I saw the moment when Horus, empowered by all 4 Chaos Gods, struck the blow that shattered the Emperor's mortal form beyond any hope of healing. I saw Horus die by his father's hand, his soul obliterated so completely that not even the Chaos Gods could resurrect him. And I saw the Emperor carried broken to the Golden Throne, his body ruined, his plans for humanity's future now dependent on his surviving in a state between life and death for an unknown span of time. The vision stopped. I found myself back in the throne room on my knees at the base of the golden throne, my armor scorched and smoking despite not being near any source of heat. Blood covered my face, my neck had pooled on the platform around me. My hearts were beating irregularly, struggling to maintain rhythm under the assault they had just endured. The Emperor's eyes remained fixed on me. Now you have seen a fraction of the truth, Aurelius Thane. Now you understand why I have maintained silence for 10,000 years, communicating only through visions to saints and astropaths, never directly addressing those in this chamber. His voice was softer now, almost gentle, but that only made it more terrifying. I am not what you believed me to be. I am not what anyone believes me to be. I am a perpetual, yes, as some have guessed, but I am more than that. I possess precognitive abilities beyond mortal comprehension. I see possible futures branching out before me like a tree with infinite limbs. Every decision humanity makes, I can perceive its likely outcomes. Every war you fight, I have already seen its probable conclusions. Every hope you hold, I already know the paths that might fulfill it or crush it. I tried to speak, tried to form words, but my jaw would not work properly. My tongue felt thick and useless in my mouth. The Great Crusade was not about reunification alone, he continued. It was about positioning. Humanity was scattered across the stars by old night, cut off and isolated. But the pattern of that scattering, the locations where human worlds survived, these were not random. They formed a network, and I needed to reconnect that network in a specific sequence, placing specific forces in specific locations before the true threats arrived. My brothers, I managed to force out, my voice barely a whisper. The other custodians, why did only I feel your summons? Because only you have the neural structure capable of receiving what I must share without complete mental collapse. His answer was matter of fact, devoid of sympathy. I have been observing you for 6 centuries, Aurelius Thane, watching your mind develop the specific patterns necessary to comprehend what I am about to reveal. You are the first in 3,000 years to achieve this state. The implications of that statement crashed over me like a physical weight. 3,000 years. How many custodians had served in that time? How many had stood watch, believing they were protecting a slumbering god, never knowing they were being evaluated for some purpose they could not imagine? Everything you believe about the Imperium is both true and false, the Emperor said. The imperial truth I preached during the Crusade was correct. There are no gods in the way humanity once imagined them. But I lied about why that mattered. I did not oppose religion because it was false. I opposed it because humanity's faith has power in the warp, and that power needed to be directed away from the chaos gods and toward purposes that might actually preserve humanity rather than damn it. He leaned forward slightly, a movement that should have been impossible for a body so damaged. The golden throne keeps my broken body suspended between life and death, Aurelius. It sustains my physical form and powers the astronomicon that guides ships through the warp. But it does more than that. It anchors my consciousness to this single point in time and space, preventing me from drifting across the currents of possibility that I can perceive but no longer navigate freely. I am trapped here, experiencing every moment of the past 10,000 years in real time, unable to rest, unable to die, unable to abandon my post. I felt my mind beginning to fracture. The words he was speaking were impossible. They contradicted everything I knew, everything I was. But they also had the weight of absolute truth behind them. I could feel that truth pressing against my consciousness, demanding to be accepted. Why? I asked. Why tell me this? Why now? Because the golden throne is failing, Aurelius Thane. And you must understand what humanity truly faces so you can help them make the choice that will determine not just their future, but whether humanity has a future at all. The Emperor's mind touched mine again. But this time there was no gentleness, no gradual approach. It was like being thrown into an ocean during a storm. I was drowning in information, gasping for mental air that would not come. The throne room vanished. Terra vanished. I was nowhere and everywhere simultaneously, watching visions of futures that might come to pass, possibilities branching out in every direction like cracks spreading through glass. I saw humanity's birth as a species crawling out of caves and learning to make fire. But I also saw humanity's end. A dozen different ends, each one more terrible than the last. I saw worlds consumed by green fungus that screamed and laughed as it killed. I saw entire star systems devoured by living ships that blotted out the light of suns. I saw reality itself tear apart as the warp bled into real space, turning planets inside out and transforming humans into screaming nightmares of flesh and bone. And through it all, I saw the Emperor, in every vision of the future, in every possible path, always watching, always calculating, always trying to guide humanity toward the narrow paths where survival might be possible. The Great Crusade materialized around me. I stood on the bridge of a ship I did not recognize, watching as the Emperor addressed his Primarchs. All 20 of them were there, including the 2 whose names had been erased from history. They stood in a semicircle around their father, these giants who had conquered worlds in his name. They looked proud. They looked purposeful. They looked like the heroes the Imperium still sang about 10,000 years later. But I could see what they could not. I could see the subtle currents of warp energy that flowed through each Primarch, how their very existence created zones of stable reality in a universe that wanted to collapse into chaos. I could see how their conquest of specific worlds in specific orders created a pattern across the galaxy, a network of strength that would be needed for what came after. The Emperor was not looking at his sons with simple pride or love. He was looking at them as a general looks at his officers, as an architect looks at the foundations of a structure that must endure for millennia. These were his sons, yes, created from his own essence. But they were also tools, weapons, anchors designed to fulfill purposes they did not fully understand. And that dual nature, that tension between father and creator, would eventually tear everything apart. I watched as the Emperor explained the Great Crusade to them. He told them about bringing lost human worlds back into the fold. He told them about creating a galaxy safe for humanity. He told them about building an empire that would stand for 10,000 years. He did not tell them about the precognitive visions that guided his every decision. He did not tell them that the sequence of worlds they conquered mattered more than the speed of conquest. He did not tell them that some of them were destined to fall, that their failures were built into the design of the future he was trying to create. The scene shifted. Now I stood in a private chamber deep beneath the Imperial Palace. The Emperor and Horus were alone. This was years before Davin, before the corruption, before the heresy began. But I could see the strain already forming between them. "Father," Horus said, his voice carrying a weariness that no space marine should ever feel. "The campaign stretches too thin. We conquer worlds faster than we can properly integrate them. The people we are supposed to be saving sometimes fight harder against us than the aliens we are supposed to be protecting them from. I need to understand the greater purpose. What are we truly building? Why must it happen exactly as you have decreed, with no room for adaptation or mercy?" The Emperor studied his son for a long moment. I could see him weighing his response, calculating how much truth Horus could handle, how much revelation would help versus hurt. When he spoke, his words were careful. "We are building a network of human worlds strong enough to endure what is coming, my son. Threats you cannot yet imagine, threats I can barely prepare us to face. Every world must be brought into the fold in the proper sequence because the pattern of conquest creates the strength we will need. I know it seems arbitrary. I know it seems cruel, but trust that there is purpose behind every command I give." Horus's face showed frustration. "But what threats, Father? You speak of dangers but never name them. You demand trust but offer no explanations. How can I lead effectively when I do not understand the true enemy we are preparing to face?" The Emperor's expression remained unreadable. Because naming them gives them power, my son. Because explaining the full scope of what humanity faces would break the morale of every soldier in the crusade. Some knowledge is too heavy to bear while still maintaining the will to fight. When the time comes, when the preparations are complete, I will tell you everything. Until then, I need you to trust me and to follow my commands exactly as I give them. I watched Horus struggle with that answer. I saw the doubt taking root, the feeling of being used rather than valued, the sense that his father saw him as a tool rather than a son. This conversation, played out dozens of times in slightly different forms over the years of the crusade, was laying the foundation for what would come later. Not causing it. Not deliberately pushing Horus toward chaos, but creating the cracks in trust that chaos would later exploit. The Emperor knew this. I could see in his eyes that he perceived this conversation's role in future events. And he had chosen to have it anyway because every alternative he could foresee was worse. The scene dissolved, reformed into the temple on Davin. I watched Horus struck down by the anatheme blade, its chaos-corrupted edge delivering a wound that should not have been possible to inflict on a Primarch. I watched him carried to the Serpent Lodge, watched the priests of chaos begin their work, their rituals designed to turn the Emperor's favorite son against him. And I saw the Emperor's awareness of these events as they unfolded. Not physically present, but psychically conscious, his precognitive abilities having already shown him this moment hundreds of times in visions of possible futures. I saw him face the terrible choice. He could intervene directly, using his psychic might to burn away the corruption before it took hold. But in the visions where he did that, Horus survived but was diminished, his confidence broken, his effectiveness as a military commander reduced. And without Horus at full strength, the latter stages of the crusade failed. Critical worlds were not conquered in time. The positioning of forces was wrong when the true threats arrived. Humanity died faster in those futures, or he could rush to Davin physically, abandoning the Webway project on Terra. But in those visions, the half-finished Webway gate became a portal for demonic invasion. Terra itself fell within a decade, and without Terra, the Imperium collapsed into warring fragments that the enemies of mankind picked off one by one. The Emperor made his choice. He would continue his work on the Webway. He would trust that Horus was strong enough to resist, or if Horus fell, that the Emperor could eventually defeat his corrupted son and use the tragedy to forge humanity into the shape it needed to survive. It was not a good choice. It was not a kind choice. It was simply the least terrible option he could perceive among hundreds of terrible possibilities. The Horus heresy unfolded before me in flashes of images and sensations. Istvan III, where loyalists were betrayed and murdered by their own brothers. Istvan Viv, where entire legions were ambushed and destroyed. The Shadow Crusade across Ultramar, leaving worlds burning in its wake. Kalth, where the Word-Bearers attempted to destroy the Ultramarines. Prospero, where the Space Wolves destroyed the Thousand Suns, not knowing they were being manipulated by chaos. I saw every betrayal, every atrocity, every brother killing brother. And through it all, I saw the Emperor working on Terra, laboring to complete the Webway project even as his Imperium burned, even as his sons killed each other, even as everything he had built threatened to collapse. He was not orchestrating the heresy. He was trying to salvage something from it, trying to ensure that even in failure, humanity would gain the strengths it needed for what came after. I saw specific moments where he might have intervened more directly, might have prevented specific tragedies. And in each case, I saw his precognitive awareness showing him why intervention would make things worse in the long term. Ferrus Manus dying on Istvan V. His death not prevented because his legion needed to be scattered and tempered by that loss to become the weapon they would later need to be. Sanguinius choosing to face Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit, the Emperor not stopping him because that sacrifice would echo through the Blood Angels for 10,000 years, creating a strength of will that would save countless worlds. Even Horus himself, the emperor's most beloved son, allowed to fall fully into chaos because a partially corrupted war master would have been even more dangerous, spreading corruption more slowly and insidiously than open rebellion. Every tragedy served a purpose. Every failure created strength. And the emperor bore the weight of allowing it all to happen because the alternative was extinction. The vision shifted forward. I saw the final confrontation between the emperor and Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit. I saw the battle that legends had been built upon, but now I saw the truth beneath the legend. The emperor had the power to destroy Horus from the first moment of their duel. His psychic might, fully unleashed, could have vaporized his corrupted son in an instant. But he held back, hoping desperately that some fragment of the Horus he had loved still existed within the shell of chaos empowerment. He fought defensively, accepting terrible wounds, giving Horus every chance to remember who he had been. And then came the moment that changed everything. A lone custodian, seeing his emperor losing, charged forward to intervene. Horus obliterated him with casual contempt, not even pausing in his assault on the emperor. And in that moment of callous murder, the emperor finally understood that his son was truly gone. Nothing remained but the puppet of chaos wearing Horus's face. What happened next was not justice. It was not mercy. It was necessity. The emperor unleashed the full extent of his power and destroyed Horus so completely that not even the chaos gods could resurrect what remained. Body, soul, and essence obliterated from existence. The emperor's most beloved son, the one he had hoped to save until the very end, erased from reality in a final act of terrible love. And then the emperor himself collapsed, his body broken beyond any hope of normal healing, carried dying to the golden throne by the Primarch Rogel Dorn and what remained of his honor guard. I saw the throne's mechanisms connect to his shattered form. I saw the first sacrifice of Psychers, their lives burned away to sustain him. I saw the moment when he should have died but instead remained, trapped in a state between life and death, beginning his 10,000-year vigil of agony. The timeline rushed forward. I saw the Emperor's consciousness locked to the golden throne, perceiving the slow transformation of his Imperium over millennia. I saw the imperial truth abandoned. I saw science give way to superstition. I saw his mortal administrators struggling to hold the Imperium together, gradually allowing the formation of the imperial cult when they realized that faith in the God Emperor was more effective at maintaining unity than the cold rationalism he had preached. The Emperor hated it. Every prayer sent his way felt like a knife in his consciousness. Every moment of worship was a betrayal of everything he had fought for. But something else was happening too. All that faith, all that devotion, all those prayers from trillions of believers across 1,000,000 worlds, they generated psychic energy. Vast amounts of warp power that flowed into him through the golden throne, making him stronger even as his body continued to decay. He realized the terrible irony. The imperial cult he despised was also empowering him in ways the imperial truth never could have. Faith was making him into the god he had never wanted to be, giving him strength he would desperately need for what was coming. So he endured it. He allowed the worship to continue, even encouraged it through visions sent to saints and prophets. Not because he wanted to be worshipped, but because humanity would need every scrap of power he could accumulate. And what was coming? The vision expanded, showing me something from beyond the galaxy. I saw darkness between the stars. Not the darkness of empty space, but something alive, something hungry, something vast beyond comprehension. The Tyranids. I watched as the first tendrils of their hive fleets entered the galaxy, small expeditionary forces that the Imperium designated as Hive Fleet Behemoth, Kraken, Leviathan. They seemed like individual threats, separate invasions. But I saw the truth the Emperor had perceived through his precognitive visions. These were not separate fleets. They were scouts, advanced tendrils of something so vast that its true scale was incomprehensible. The bulk of the Tyranid hive still approached from beyond the galactic rim, moving slowly but inexorably toward the light of the Astronomicon like moths drawn to a flame. I saw visions of what would happen when the true hive fleet arrived. Not in hundreds of years, not in thousands, in mere centuries by the scale of galactic time. The year was now in the early 42nd millennium, and the Great Devourer approached. I watched in horror as this future version of the hive fleet entered the galaxy in force. It was not a fleet, it was a living carpet that covered entire spiral arms, thousands of bioships that blotted out the stars. Worlds did not fall one by one. They fell in clusters, entire sectors consumed in weeks. I saw the Imperium's response, the full might of the Astra Militarum mobilized, Space Marine chapters that had not fought together since the heresy united in desperate defense. The Mechanicum deployed technologies that had been kept in vaults for millennia. Even the Adeptus Custodes left Terra in numbers not seen since the Great Crusade. It was not enough. The Tyranids adapted to every weapon, every tactic, every defense. What worked once failed the second time. What killed one generation of Tyranids was countered by the next. They learned from every battle, incorporated. The strengths of every species they consumed became more efficient with every world they devoured. I watched as hive world after hive world fell. I watched as forge worlds were stripped of all organic material. I watched as chapter home worlds were overrun, space marines fighting to the last bolt round before being torn apart and absorbed. And through it all, I heard the Emperor's voice explaining what I was witnessing. This is what I have seen in my visions, Aurelius. This is what approaches in the next 2 centuries if humanity does not fundamentally change. The Tyranids are not an enemy you can negotiate with or deceive. They are hunger given form, a force of nature as unstoppable as entropy itself. But there was something else in the vision. In this version of the future, I saw humanity fighting with a unity born of faith. I saw planetary governors who ordered the complete destruction of their own worlds rather than let them feed the hive. I saw soldiers who fought beyond any reasonable expectation of survival because they believed the God Emperor was watching their sacrifice. I saw entire populations willingly submit to death to deny the Tyranids even one more meal of biomass. The fanaticism I had been taught to see as corruption, as betrayal of the imperial truth, had become humanity's greatest strength. They did not win. Not in this vision. But they held far longer than they should have. They extracted a price for every world that forced the hive mind to adapt in ways it had not anticipated. They bought time. Time for the few remaining forge worlds to complete experimental weapons. Time for unlikely alliances to form with desperate xenos species who also faced extinction. Time for solutions to emerge from the sheer desperation of facing an enemy that could not be defeated through normal warfare. The vision continued past the point where I expected it to end. I saw decades of brutal warfare. I saw the hive fleet reach Terra itself, saw the cradle of humanity besieged by living ships that numbered in the millions. I saw the final defense of the throne world, every soul on Terra united in desperate resistance. And I saw something impossible. I saw the faith of those defenders, their absolute belief in the God Emperor manifest as actual power in the warp. The prayers of quadrillions of humans created a psychic resonance so powerful it pushed back against the hive mind itself. Not defeating it, not destroying it, but disrupting its perfect coordination, creating confusion in a species that had never known confusion. In that moment of disruption, as the Tyranids faltered, I saw new technologies deployed. I saw weapons that turned the hive mind's adaptability against itself. I saw alliances between desperate species who had learned to work together in the face of extinction. I saw the Emperor himself, his consciousness grown vast on 10,000 years of accumulated faith, reaching out through the warp to guide and protect in ways he had never been able to do while still pretending to maintain the imperial truth. They held. Barely. At terrible cost. But they held. and in holding they created the possibility of something new. Not victory, because the Tyranids could not be truly defeated as long as the greater hive existed beyond the galaxy. But survival, a chance to adapt, to evolve, to become something capable of enduring in a universe that wanted to consume them. I returned to my body with violence that left me gasping. The Emperor sat before me on the golden throne, his eyes still burning with that terrible golden light. Every sacrifice, every manipulation, every calculated tragedy over 10,000 years, all of it was to prepare humanity for what approaches. The imperial truth would have left humanity strong in reason but weak in unity. The imperial cult leaves humanity strong in faith and unified in purpose, even if that faith is built on a lie. And that strength, that unity, might be the only thing that allows your species to survive the next 2 centuries. I could not speak. The horror of what I had witnessed left me paralyzed. The Emperor continued, his mental voice relentless. I have spent 10,000 years in agony, Aurelius, sustained by the worship I despised, empowered by the faith I tried to prevent, trapped on this throne, forced to maintain the Astronomicon, forced to guide the Imperium through visions and subtle interventions. Never able to rest, never able to die. And I have done this because I saw no other path, because every vision where I acted differently led to faster, more complete extinction. I am not asking you to approve of my choices. I am asking you to understand why they were made. He leaned back, and for the first time I saw something that might have been doubt in his expression. But now the golden throne fails. The mechanisms that sustain my body and anchor my consciousness weaken with each passing year. Within 50 years, perhaps less, they will collapse entirely. And when that happens, humanity must be ready to face what comes next without me. That is why I have finally spoken. That is why I have chosen you to bear this knowledge, because someone must understand the truth. Someone must be able to guide humanity through the transition from my rule to whatever comes after. I could not breathe. The air in the throne room had not changed. The recycled atmosphere still contained the exact mixture of oxygen and nitrogen it always had, but my lungs refused to process it. My body was rejecting the truth it had been forced to witness. Every horror of the Imperium, every burning of a heretic, every forced conversion, every child taken from their family to serve the ecclesiarchy, every life sacrificed on the altar of blind faith, all of it was allowed to happen. All of it served a purpose. All of it was accepted by the Emperor as the price of survival. The word tasted like poison in my mind. Necessary. How could any of this be necessary? How could the suffering of trillions be justified by the mere possibility of survival against an enemy that had not even arrived yet? How could the betrayal of every principle the Emperor had once claimed to hold sacred be acceptable as a means to an end? You are struggling to reconcile what you have learned with what you were taught to believe. The Emperor's voice was almost gentle now, which somehow made it worse. This is natural. This is the response I expected. But you must understand, Aurelius, that leadership is the art of choosing between terrible options. When you can see the likely outcomes of every choice, when you know with reasonable certainty what each decision will lead to, ethics becomes a matter of calculating which path causes the least total suffering, even if that path requires accepting horrors that would be unthinkable under normal circumstances. I reject that, I said, forcing the words through a throat that felt crushed. I reject the idea that suffering can be quantified and optimized like a mathematical equation. I reject the notion that humans are merely variables in your calculations. People are not numbers. Their pain is not acceptable just because you claim it serves a greater purpose. The Emperor leaned back in his throne, and for the first time I saw something that might have been surprise flicker across his ancient face. And what would you have me do instead, Captain Aurelius Thane? What alternative do you offer? Tell them the truth, I said, the words coming from somewhere deep inside me, from some part of my consciousness that had not yet been broken by the revelations. Show them what you have shown me. Give humanity the choice to prepare for what comes with full knowledge rather than being manipulated like children who cannot be trusted with difficult information. His response was immediate and carried the weight of experience I could not match. I understand that impulse, Aurelius. The desire for transparency, for treating people as equals capable of handling difficult truths. But reality does not reward that kind of idealism. I have seen through my precognitive visions hundreds of variations where I revealed everything to humanity. Where I told them about the Tyranids, about the calculated nature of the imperial cult, about the necessity of the choices I had made. Do you know what happened in the majority of those visions? The Imperium tore itself apart within decades. Faced with the certainty of their eventual extinction, humans did not unite. They fragmented. Some demanded I find a better solution and blamed me when I could not. Others decided to enjoy their remaining time rather than sacrifice for a future they might not live to see. Still others went mad from the knowledge, their minds unable to cope with the meaninglessness of existence in the face of inevitable annihilation. By the time the Tyranids arrived, they found humanity already dead, consumed by its own despair and internal conflicts. But that was just the visions, I said, grasping for any argument that might restore some sense of meaning to existence. Those were possible futures, not certainties. Perhaps if you tried again with different words, different timing, the outcome would be different. My visions are not perfect predictions, Aurelius, but they are reliable enough. Out of hundreds of variations where I revealed the full truth early, only a handful led to outcomes better than maintaining the lie. The odds do not favor transparency when the truth is as terrible as what humanity faces. Most humans, perhaps most beings of any species, are simply not equipped to maintain hope and purpose when confronted with the scale of cosmic horror that awaits in the galaxy. They need the comfort of faith. They need to believe that someone is in control, that there is a plan, that their suffering serves a divine purpose even if they cannot see it. Take that away. Show them the cold calculation behind everything, and you destroy the very psychological foundations that allow them to endure. I felt tears running down my face, mixing with the blood already covering my skin. My hands were shaking so badly that my guardian spear rattled against the stone floor. Everything I was, everything I had believed myself to be, was built on foundations of carefully constructed lies. And the being who had constructed those lies was telling me it was for my own good, for humanity's own good, that I was better off not knowing the truth. Except I did know now. I knew, and it was destroying me. Why did you tell me then? I asked, my voice breaking. If the truth only causes harm, if it only leads to despair and collapse, why show me all of this? Why not let me continue in ignorance like everyone else? Because the golden throne is failing, and I need someone who understands the full context to help guide what comes next. His voice carried an exhaustion that transcended physical weariness. The mechanisms are breaking down. Within 50 years, perhaps less, they will collapse entirely. When that happens, several things will occur simultaneously. The Astronomicon will transform or possibly fail. My consciousness, no longer anchored to the throne, will either dissipate or spread throughout the warp in ways I cannot predict. And humanity will suddenly find itself without the beacon that has guided them for 10 millennia. Without the psychic protection I have provided, facing the Tyranid threat with no buffer between them and extinction. He leaned forward, his golden eyes blazing with intensity. I need someone who understands what I have been trying to accomplish. Someone who can help the Imperium's leaders make sense of what happens when I am gone. Someone who can explain, if explanation becomes necessary, why things were the way they were. But more than that, I need someone to help humanity make a choice about how to face what comes next. And that choice cannot be made from ignorance. It must be made with full understanding of what is at stake. What choice? I asked, though part of me feared the answer. The choice between continuing as they have been or attempting to transform into something new. he said. The Imperium I see now in the early 42nd millennium is reaching a breaking point. The old systems strain under their own weight. Worlds that have tithed for 10,000 years finally have nothing left to give. The faith that has sustained humanity grows both stronger and more brittle, capable of inspiring incredible sacrifice, but also capable of shattering under the wrong kind of pressure. Technology continues to be lost faster than it is rediscovered. The enemies of mankind grow more numerous and more coordinated. Something must change, or the Imperium will collapse before the Tyranids even arrive in force. But what can change without destroying everything? I asked. The Imperium is built on foundations you yourself designed. Pull out one piece and the entire structure might collapse. That is the dilemma, he agreed, and that is why the choice is so difficult. Humanity could continue on the current path, maintaining the faith and the structures that have preserved them, hoping that what has worked for 10,000 years will continue to work for 200 more. Or humanity could risk transformation, could attempt to rediscover the imperial truth while maintaining enough unity to face the Tyranid threat, could try to become something new even though the process of transformation might destroy them. I saw a third option then, saw it with sudden clarity born of desperation. What if the choice is not yours to make? What if you give humanity the information they need and let them decide for themselves how to proceed? You have spent 40,000 years trying to control outcomes through manipulation and calculated revelation. What if the solution is to finally trust the species you have been trying to save? His expression shifted, something unreadable passing across his ancient face. You propose that I tell all of humanity the truth about what they face, about the origins of their faith, about the calculated nature of their history, and then simply allow them to make their own decisions about how to respond? Yes, I said, feeling strength returning to my voice. You showed me that your visions are not perfect. You showed me that you cannot predict every outcome. What if there is a solution you cannot see because it requires humanity to act in ways you cannot anticipate? What if the very unpredictability you have spent millennia trying to control is actually their greatest asset? The Emperor was silent for a long moment. I could feel his consciousness touching mine, examining my thoughts, weighing the suggestion against thousands of years of experience and countless visions of possible futures. When he spoke again, his voice carried something I had not heard before. Doubt mixed with hope. There is a certain logic to your proposal, he admitted. My attempts to guide humanity through manipulation have succeeded in keeping them alive for 10,000 years. But perhaps they have also prevented humanity from developing the capabilities they would need to truly thrive rather than merely survive. Perhaps my protection has been their limitation. He paused, his attention seeming to turn inward. In my visions, I have seen variations where humanity was given partial truth, carefully measured revelations designed to prepare them gradually. Those visions suggested marginal improvements in outcomes, but I have never seen a vision where I simply released all information and allowed complete freedom of choice, because my presence as a guiding force seemed too fundamental to remove from the equation. Perhaps that is the blind spot in my precognition. Perhaps I cannot see outcomes where I am not trying to control events because I cannot imagine truly letting go. I felt a shift in the air around us, a change in pressure as if reality itself was holding its breath. The Emperor continued, his words carrying the weight of a decision forming. If I do what you suggest, Aurelius, if I release the truth to all of humanity simultaneously, there will be chaos, there will be violence, there will be despair and rage and confusion on a scale that might tear the Imperium apart. Some will accept the truth and rise to meet it. Others will reject it and cling more desperately to the comfortable lies they have always believed. And the Tyranids will not pause their approach simply because humanity is distracted by existential crisis. You could all die. We could all die anyway, I said quietly. Die as ignorant pawns following a plan we do not understand, or die as free beings who at least had the chance to choose our own fate. His eyes bore into mine with an intensity that threatened to burn away what remained of my sanity. You truly believe humanity is strong enough to handle this? You truly believe they can maintain the unity and purpose necessary to survive while simultaneously grappling with the revelation that their entire civilization was built on carefully constructed lies? I do not know, I admitted, but I believe they deserve the chance to try. And I believe that if you continue making all their choices for them, even from beyond death, you ensure that humanity never grows beyond needing you. The species that survives because you controlled every variable is not really humanity anymore. It is just your creation, existing in the shape you designed, following the patterns you established, never truly free to become something you did not plan for them to be. The Emperor's expression shifted again. For a moment I saw something that might have been pride, or perhaps it was sorrow for what he was about to lose. You have convinced me, Aurelius Thane. Not because your logic is perfect, not because I am certain this will lead to better outcomes, but because I am tired. Tired of controlling, tired of manipulating, tired of bearing sole responsibility for humanity's survival. If they are to have any chance of enduring beyond the next 2 centuries, they must learn to save themselves. And that lesson can only be taught by releasing them from my guidance. He raised one withered hand, the movement clearly causing him pain. What I am about to do cannot be undone. Once the truth is released, once humanity knows what they face and how they have been shaped, the old order will collapse. What rises from those ruins, if anything rises at all, will be determined by choices made by billions of individuals rather than by my calculations. This is the greatest risk I have ever taken, greater than the Great Crusade, greater than allowing the heresy to unfold. Because this time I will not be manipulating events from behind the scenes. I will not be subtly guiding outcomes toward preferred futures. I will simply provide information and trust that humanity has grown strong enough to use that information wisely. He closed his eyes, gathering power. I could feel psychic energy building around the throne, not the focused beam of the Astronomicon, but something vast and diffuse. Are you prepared for what follows, Aurelius? Are you ready to bear witness to the end of the Imperium as it has existed and the uncertain birth of whatever comes next? I straightened my back despite the pain radiating through my body. I gripped my guardian spear and met his closed eyes with as much courage as I could gather. I am ready, my lord, for humanity, for the future, for whatever truth brings. Then let it be done, he said. And the Astronomicon transformed. The beam that had burned steadily for 10,000 years suddenly spread, diffusing across the entire galaxy like light through a prism. And everywhere it touched, human minds received the truth. Not the complete visions he had shown me, not the full weight of seeing thousands of possible futures, but enough. Enough to understand that the Emperor had been guiding events all along. Enough to know that the imperial cult was both a lie and a necessary tool. Enough to comprehend the tyrannid threat and the calculated nature of the sacrifices demanded by the Imperium. Enough to realize they had a choice about how to face what came next. The throne room shuddered. The mechanisms around the golden throne began to spark and fail, exactly as I had seen in the visions. The Emperor's form became translucent, his consciousness beginning to diffuse across the galaxy, even as his physical body finally began to die. And as he faded, he smiled. Perhaps this timeline will be different, he said, his voice growing distant. Perhaps this is the moment where humanity finally surprises me. I watched him disappear, felt the Astronomicon transform from a focused beam into a spreading wave of light and knowledge, and I knew that whatever came next, whatever choice humanity made, it would be theirs alone. The Emperor had finally let go, and now we would discover if we were strong enough to survive without him, or if his protection had been the only thing keeping us alive all along. The Emperor dissolved before my eyes like mist under morning sun. The golden throne sat empty for the first time in 10,000 years, its mechanism still sparking and dying around it. The massive conduits that had channeled psychic energy through the palace began to dim. The walls themselves seemed to groan as if mourning the loss of the consciousness that had inhabited them for so long. I knelt on the obsidian floor, my armor ruined, my body broken, my mind barely holding together after everything I had witnessed. And I was alone. The tech priests who had maintained the throne were gone, their bodies scattered across the chamber, their machine spirits silent. The Sisters of Silence had collapsed during the Emperor's final moments, their null fields unable to protect them from the psychic storm that had accompanied his dissolution. Even my fellow custodians, those who had stood eternal watch alongside me, lay motionless on the floor below. I was the only witness to what had truly occurred in this chamber, the only one who knew the complete truth behind the transformation. The weight of that knowledge threatened to crush me more effectively than any physical force ever could. I do not know how long I knelt there. Time seemed meaningless in the aftermath of what I had experienced. Minutes or hours could have passed before I finally forced my body to move, to rise from the floor and face what came next. My legs shook as I stood. My vision swam. But I was a custodian built to endure beyond the limits of normal human capability. I would not fail in this final duty, even if I did not yet fully understand what that duty would require. I descended the 1,000 steps from the throne platform. Each step felt like walking through water. My enhanced healing was working to repair the damage inflicted on my body, but some wounds go deeper than flesh and bone. My mind had been opened to truths it was never designed to contain, and no amount of genetic engineering could repair that kind of trauma quickly. At the base of the steps, I found Shield Captain Valoris stirring. He was the first of my brothers to regain consciousness, his hand reaching instinctively for his guardian spear before his eyes even opened. When he saw me, bloodied and burned, standing over him, his expression shifted from combat readiness to confusion. "Brother Aurelius," he said, his voice rough. "What happened?" "The throne, the Emperor." I felt something, a presence, a departure, knowledge pouring into my mind. And now there is silence where there should never be silence. I helped him to his feet, feeling the weight of the choice I faced. I could tell him everything I had witnessed in detail. I could share the complete visions the Emperor had shown me, explain the full scope of the manipulation and calculation. Or I could trust that he, like every other human in the Imperium, had received enough information through the transformed Astronomicon to understand the essentials. The Emperor had made his choice to release the truth. Now I had to decide what my role would be in helping humanity process that truth. "Brother," Valoris said, his hand gripping my arm. The knowledge that just touched my mind, everyone felt it, did they not? Everyone across the Imperium? "Yes," I said simply. "The Emperor's final gift. The truth about what we face and how we have been shaped. He has given humanity the freedom to choose their own path forward." Valoris was silent for a moment, processing. Then he asked the question I had been dreading. "And what do we do now? What is our duty when the being we were created to protect has chosen to depart?" Before I could answer, the Astronomicon flared again, not with information this time, but with something else. I felt it in my bones, in my blood, in the very core of my being. Connection. The light that had been a focused beam for 10 millennia, that had briefly spread to deliver truth, now settled into something new. A network. A web of consciousness that touched every human mind in the galaxy without controlling them, that provided unity without demanding uniformity. On Terra, in the hive cities and the manufactorums and the noble spires, humans were reacting to what they had learned. I could sense it through the strange new connection the Astronomicon provided. Workers in the deep underhives looked up from their machines, their minds suddenly aware of the greater purpose their labor served. Priests in their temples fell to their knees, some in renewed devotion, others in shock at learning their god had never wanted their worship. High lords in their council chambers froze, suddenly understanding the weight of decisions they had been making without full context. The response was not uniform. The emperor had been right about that. Some minds accepted the truth and immediately began working on how to prepare for the tyrannid threat with full knowledge. Others rejected it entirely, clinging to the comfortable faith they had always known, declaring the revelations to be lies spread by chaos. Still others simply broke, their consciousness unable to reconcile what they had believed with what they now knew. But something else was happening too. Something the emperor, for all his precognitive ability, had not predicted or had been unable to see. The humans who accepted the truth were beginning to organize spontaneously, not waiting for orders from above, not looking to authorities to tell them what to do. Simply connecting with each other through the transformed Astronomicon, sharing ideas, coordinating efforts, beginning to build something new from the ground up. I felt Valoris beside me experiencing the same sensations, the same awareness of billions of minds suddenly working in a coordination that was neither controlled nor chaotic. "This is not what I expected," he said quietly. "When you said the Emperor had released the truth, I thought it would destroy us. Thought we would tear ourselves apart in confusion and despair. Perhaps we still will," I said. "This is only the first hours. The real test comes when the shock wears off and people must make difficult choices about how to proceed. But yes, something is happening that I did not anticipate. The Emperor gave them truth and freedom simultaneously. And at least some portion of humanity is rising to meet that gift rather than being crushed by it." The doors to the inner sanctum burst open. High lords and inquisitors poured in, their faces showing a mixture of terror and determination. Behind them came priests of the ecclesiarchy, their robes in disarray, many of them weeping openly, but none of them appearing to have lost their faith entirely. And behind them, representatives of 1,000 other imperial institutions, all drawn to the throne room by the psychic beacon that had just transformed their understanding of reality. They stopped when they saw the empty throne. The reaction was immediate but varied. Some fell to their knees in grief. Others stood frozen, staring at the empty seat as if unable to process what their eyes were telling them. A few, those who had most quickly accepted the truth revealed through the Astronomicon, simply waited for explanation with the calm of people who already understood what had happened. "Where is the Emperor?" one of the High Lords demanded, though his voice lacked the authority it once would have carried. His mind, touched by the revelation like everyone else's, already knew the answer but needed to hear it confirmed. "The Emperor has departed," I said, my voice carrying through the vast chamber. "His physical form has died, his consciousness has been released from the Golden Throne, but he has not abandoned humanity. He has given you something he never gave anyone in 40,000 years. He has given you the truth about what you face and the freedom to choose how to face it without his guidance manipulating your decisions." "That is heresy," one of the priests started to say, but his voice trailed off. The word no longer carried the weight it once did. How could it be heresy to speak truth when the Emperor himself had just revealed that truth to everyone? Another High Lord, the Lord Commander Militant of the Astra Militarum, stepped forward. His face was hard with the discipline of a soldier who had seen 1,000 battlefields. "If what we all felt is true, if the visions we received are accurate, then the tyrannid threat is greater than we understood. The hive fleets we have been fighting are merely scouts. The true swarm approaches and will arrive at Terra within 2 centuries. How do we prepare for that? How do we organize a defense against something that vast when our entire command structure has just been destabilized?" "That is the question all of humanity must answer," I said, "and I do not have a simple response. But I can tell you what the Emperor showed me in the moments before he departed. He showed me visions of possible futures. In some, humanity tried to prepare through central planning and top-down control, maintaining the old structures even after learning they were built on calculated manipulation. Those futures did not end well. The systems were too rigid, too slow to adapt to the scale of threat approaching. In other visions, humanity fragmented completely, each world or sector making its own decisions with no coordination. Those futures ended even worse, with the Tyranids picking off isolated human populations one by one. But in a few visions, humanity found a balance, local initiative combined with voluntary cooperation. People working together not because they were commanded to, but because they understood the necessity. That is the narrow path we must try to find. How? Another High Lord asked. How do we maintain unity when we have just learned that the authority we followed was built on lies? How do we trust leadership that has been manipulating us for 10 millennia? You do not trust leadership, a new voice said. We all turned to see an inquisitor step forward, one whose armor marked her as a veteran of countless campaigns. You trust each other? The Emperor is gone. The old authorities have been revealed as instruments of his manipulation. But the individual humans who make up the Imperium, we are still here. We still have the knowledge and skills needed to defend our species. We simply need to organize ourselves differently. She looked around at the assembled leaders, her gaze challenging. The truth we all received did not just show us the Tyranid threat. It showed us how the Emperor had been coordinating efforts across the galaxy through subtle manipulation. Well, now that manipulation is gone. But the coordination does not have to be. The Astronomicon has transformed. I can feel it, and I know you can too. It connects us now, not controlling our thoughts, but allowing us to share information and intentions across distances that would normally make coordination impossible. If we choose to use that connection, we could organize a defense of humanity that is actually more effective than the old top-down approach because it allows for local adaptation while maintaining strategic unity. Is this even possible? Someone asked from the back of the crowd. Can we truly coordinate billions of humans across 1 million worlds without central authority forcing compliance? I do not know, the Inquisitor admitted. But I know we must try, because the alternative is either returning to the comfortable lies that the Emperor just destroyed, or fragmenting into isolated groups that will be consumed piecemeal. I felt something shift in the chamber. Not agreement exactly, not everyone was convinced, but enough people were willing to try. Enough minds were opening to the possibility that humanity could survive through cooperation rather than coercion. Through shared purpose rather than blind obedience. Valorous spoke then, his voice carrying the authority of a shield captain even in this moment of transition. We custodians were created to guard the Emperor. That duty is now complete, but we were also created to protect humanity, and that duty continues. I propose that we use our capabilities not to enforce the will of absent authorities, but to facilitate the coordination this new age requires. We can be bridges between worlds and factions. We can be protectors of the knowledge needed to face what comes. We can be witnesses to ensure that the truth the Emperor died to give us is not forgotten or twisted back into comfortable lies. Other voices rose then, each one proposing roles and structures, arguing and debating, but all of them moving forward rather than backward. I watched as something began to form from the chaos. Not a perfect plan, not a guarantee of success, but a genuine attempt to rise to the challenge the Emperor had set before humanity. As the discussions continued, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find a tech priest, one of the few who had survived the Emperor's departure. Her augmented voice carried a strange mixture of grief and excitement. Custodian Thane, I have been monitoring the Forge worlds. The revelation has reached them as well. The Mechanicum is in turmoil, but something extraordinary is happening. Adepts who have been hoarding knowledge for millennia are suddenly sharing it openly. Technologies that were kept secret are being distributed. They are abandoning the religious restrictions that prevented innovation and beginning to actually solve problems that the Omnissiah would have wanted solved. Is it widespread? I asked. Or just isolated incidents? Both, she admitted. Many tech priests are resisting, clinging to the old dogmas. But enough are embracing change that new capabilities are being developed at a pace not seen since before the age of strife. If this continues, if we can maintain this burst of innovation for even a few decades, we might develop weapons and defenses against the tyrannids that would have been impossible under the old system. That is the gamble, I said. Whether the benefits of this freedom and coordination can develop fast enough to offset the chaos and vulnerability that comes with tearing down the old structures. The tech priest nodded. The Emperor calculated that it was worth the risk. He must have believed humanity was ready for this, or he would not have released the truth. I am not certain he believed we were ready, I said quietly. I think he simply recognized that continuing to control us would ultimately fail. This is not a plan. This is an experiment born of desperation and hope in equal measure. The hours passed. Slowly, a rough consensus began to emerge from the assembled leaders. Not a new government, not a replacement for the Imperium as it had been, but a framework for cooperation. Worlds would maintain their local governance but would coordinate defense and resource sharing through the transformed Astronomicon. The Adeptus Astartes would continue their role as defenders but would no longer be bound by traditions that prevented adaptation. The Mechanicum would share technologies needed for survival while preserving knowledge that could be dangerous. The Ecclesiarchy faced the most difficult transformation. How do you maintain faith when you have learned your God never wanted to be worshipped? The priests who gathered in the throne room debated for hours before reaching a conclusion that surprised me. We will maintain the faith, their speaker declared. But we will change its nature. We will worship not the Emperor as he was, but the ideals he fought for. The protection of humanity. The advancement of knowledge, the courage to face terrible truths and continue fighting anyway. He gave his freedom and his comfort to keep humanity alive for 10,000 years. That sacrifice deserves to be remembered and honored, even if he would have preferred we honored it through our actions rather than our prayers. It was not perfect. Many details remained unresolved. Many potential problems had no clear solutions. But it was a beginning. Valoris turned to me as the first emergency council began to disperse, its members returning to their domains to begin implementing the new framework. What will you do now, brother? You have delivered the Emperor's final message. You have witnessed the birth of whatever comes next. What is your purpose in this new age? I thought about that question. I thought about the visions I had seen, the truths I had learned, the lies I had lived. I thought about the Emperor dissolving before my eyes, finally finding release after millennia of suffering. And I thought about the billions of humans across the galaxy, suddenly aware of the sword hanging over their heads, suddenly responsible for their own survival. I will bear witness, I said finally. I will preserve the complete truth of what happened here so that future generations understand why things changed as they did. I will ensure that the knowledge the Emperor died to give us is not lost or corrupted over time. And I will watch as humanity makes its choice, whatever that choice may be, ready to serve however I can but no longer trying to control outcomes. And if we fail, Valoris asked quietly, if we destroy ourselves before the tyrannids arrive, if we prove that the Emperor was right to control us, that we cannot be trusted with our own fate, then at least we will have failed as free beings, I said. At least we will have had the chance to choose our own path, to become something the Emperor did not plan for us to be. He gave us that gift at the cost of his own existence. The question now is whether we are brave enough to accept it. I turned away from the throne, from the empty seat that had defined the Imperium for 10,000 years. Around me, humanity was beginning to stir, beginning to organize, beginning to dream of futures they could shape rather than futures planned for them by an absent God. It was chaos. It was terrifying. It was human. And as I walked through the crowd, feeling the strange new connection the transformed Astronomicon provided, I realized what the Emperor had truly done. He had not revealed the truth to save humanity. He had revealed the truth to free humanity, free from his control, free from blind faith, free from the comfortable ignorance that had sustained them but also limited them. The truth was not about tyrannids or timelines or calculated suffering. The truth was simpler and more profound. Humanity did not need a god. Humanity needed to believe in itself. I reached the doors of the throne room and paused, looking back one final time at the golden throne. Empty now, silent, a relic of an age that had just ended. But I also saw something else. I saw humans gathering around it, not in worship but in discussion. I saw minds that had been closed by dogma suddenly opening to new possibilities. I saw fear transforming into determination. I saw the first stirrings of something the Emperor had tried to create through control, but had only achieved by letting go. I saw unity born not from manipulation but from shared understanding. Not from blind obedience, but from informed choice. Not from faith in a distant God, but from faith in each other. What happens when the Emperor finally reveals the truth? The universe does not tremble, the gods do not quail. Instead, something more subtle and more powerful occurs. Humanity wakes up, not to salvation, not to guaranteed survival, but to possibility, to freedom, to the terrifying and exhilarating reality that their fate is in their own hands. The Emperor is gone, the truth is known, and humanity faces a choice that will determine not just their survival, but what kind of species they want to be when they meet the darkness that awaits them. I am Captain Aurelius Thane of the Adeptus Custodes. I witnessed the Emperor's final act. I bore witness to the end of manipulation and the birth of genuine human agency. And now I will watch as humanity decides whether that freedom will save them or damn them. The work has only begun. 2 centuries seems like a long time until you realize how much must change, how many minds must be convinced, how many old hatreds must be overcome, how many new capabilities must be developed. But for the first time in 10,000 years, humanity has the freedom to try. Not as pawns in someone else's game, not as children being guided by an all-knowing parent, but as adults responsible for their own fate, working together not because they are forced to, but because they choose to. And perhaps that freedom, that terrible, beautiful freedom to succeed or fail on their own merits, is worth whatever price must be paid for it. The golden age of manipulation has ended. The age of genuine human choice has begun. Whether that choice leads to extinction or transcendence remains to be seen. But at least it will be humanity's choice to make, and that, in the end, might be the greatest gift the Emperor ever gave his species. The freedom to become something he never planned. The freedom to surprise even a being who thought he had seen every possible future. The freedom to write their own story rather than following the script he had prepared. That is what happens when the Emperor finally reveals the truth. Everything changes, and nothing is certain except that humanity, for the first time in 40 millennia, is finally free.